All right, we're live. Welcome, everyone. This is a great opportunity for me to be with my brother and colleague here, Dr. Bohemier, who hopefully many of you know now through the masterclass and some of the interviews and live streams we've been doing, because we're in this together. We have been, sort of like really searching our own soul to try to figure out best how to deliver to you information and then tools that will really help you. And so we're counting on you today to tell us what you need, question, answer, as well as, we'd love to share some thoughts we've had that we feel will be probably pretty resonant to you and actually really encouraging. And actually, Joelle does that for me a lot. So I'm going to just pass it to Joelle.
And you to me as well. Absolutely. There's no question.
We're in it together, brother. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so let's start today by just talking about what's happening in globally and just societally. I mean, we're looking at the questioning and or the breakdown of the pillars of society that we always hold up and revere, really: spirituality, the economy, family and relationships, communication / media, healthcare and medicine, education, the government. All of these things over the last couple of years we're seeing erode before our eyes, and in the last year, really, we're seeing an acceleration of the questioning, the mistrust, the lack of integrity, and the erosion of those pillars of society. And it's fascinating to be a part of it. However, it does leave people vulnerable, I believe. I believe it leaves people feeling anxious, maybe slightly questioning their direction. I mean, ultimately, we've been told, especially in relationships, that our friends and family are vectors of disease that will possibly kill us. So don't go visit grandmother. And I've heard that from young children. I can't go visit my grandmother. I don't want to kill her. And just think of the psychological torment and abuse that puts on a human body. And so ultimately, I feel like we're seeing a very anti-human movement that is very injurious to the soul and to the spirit of humans. And I'd like to touch on each one with you, Sarah, because, over the last few years, we've discussed these, and then to end up with possibly a resolution or action steps that we can take to heal individually and then to heal collectively, so we can regenerate our bodies, minds, and souls to become better humans and to really evolve into a better version of ourselves and communities that we had maybe before.
I love it. You're outlining for us all the many dimensions that are presently, honestly, just completely unraveling. And some of us are feeling in ways that things are dying. And that's actually not so scary a thing when we understand what regeneration really is.
That's right. That's right.
Because technically that's what regeneration implies. It already implies there's been a descent into dissolution of structure or health, and regeneration reminds us that there is this bedrock, which is of course ancient principles, sometimes described now in biological terms like stem cells or resiliency, that we can draw from, and actually we are drawing from it every single moment. So it's like the phoenix metaphor. It burns to the ashes to rise again, and ultimately we are all, I think, equipped with what we need to not just navigate through this and survive. Technically, the etymology of survive means more than live. I always found that to be a clever little wink from the universe, meaning more than just survive, embedded in the word survive. So really, being that you're also, Joelle, of the chiropractic background, and Palmer has such an amazing framework as well to understand how it's really, as you've helped me understand, removing interference in the healing that is the key. It's actually very simple. So where in our lives in all the dimensions are we, for example, let's say banking, dependent on a system of centralized third-party mediated banking where basically there's usury, there's manipulation, there's capture of our information, there's so much about what's happening right now, just in the economic realm, that we, again, can reclaim our sovereignty and understand how this is an opportunity to regenerate and come through this even stronger. So that's really the intention we have here for you today, and not to have carve-outs. It's not just about little functional medical speak here and a little biophysics there. It's really about tying it all together, because ultimately that's what healing means. Last thing I'll say before I pass it back to you, Joelle, I've said this for years because it's fascinating. There's a Proto-Indo-European root language that we know exists, because if you look at the roots of the words heal, holy, and whole, they all come back to the same, basic trunk. And that's what I'm saying is holism. Like, we have all these dimensions of our being that at this moment are being radically challenged. In fact, some of us are feeling we're having near-death experiences. It could be financially, it could be psycho-spiritually. And ultimately, that's the opportunity to come back to that resilient core that helps to heal all of those aspects of our life that were once compartmentalized, that we thought we could have a carve out here and, maybe cheat a little bit over here. But you know what? It's time for us all to show up, fully integrate all aspects of our existence, and take advantage of that healing we're talking about.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. You mentioned Dr. Palmer, the developer of chiropractic, who said the major premise of chiropractic is that there is a universal intelligence in all matter, which continually gives to it all of its properties and actions, thus maintaining that matter in existence. And so, in other words, that whether you're any living being, any living thing, anything has an intelligence within it, which unites us and connects us. And as long as we have that intelligence flowing, and he says from above down, inside out, then any living being is able to, make their way through a chaotic life and environment, but make it through successfully and adapt and be resilient and regenerate. And so that happens, as you said, in all aspects of our lives. You mentioned the banking system, and it's fascinating because right now we're seeing evidence of total manipulation of the banking system. We've seen with the Wall Street bets, with the GameStop and the AMC stocks, where a bunch of individual people got together and blew up these stocks that the major banks were trying to short in order to make a bunch of money off. And it turned out that the individual little guys were able to overthrow a couple of big banks that actually fell to the tune of billions of dollars. And then they moved over to silver and trying to squeeze the price of silver because it's been artificially manipulated down. And so again, we're seeing like nefarious actions in the banking system, yet there is a solution to it, right? And that solution is the blockchain. Yet there's a lot of resistance from the World Economic Forum, from the IMF, from large institutions and large banks, from Bill Gates, who says, yeah, the blockchain is great, Bitcoin is great, but we still want to be able to control it because we want to be able to control you. You see what I'm saying? And that doesn't align with allowing this intelligence to flow through the universe, to allow it to do its job and to succeed as well as possible, right? And so I do believe that as we see the darkness, and there's a lot of it today, that there's also light that's emerging, and that light is fascinating. However, and it's promising, and it's there, and it's literally being built as we speak out of the necessity of the darkness, like in the economic system that we're dealing with right now, that's being extremely manipulated, and why only the rich get richer, or whatever the comments that people want to make about it. And so in the light, though, what's interesting is we have to walk towards it and not be afraid of it. Although it's different, and it might be stressful, and it might require learning, and it might require time, and it might require education and questioning and things of that nature, we do see that there is a potential that is greater than what was there yesterday, for example, right? And so I still feel that like great hope for the future, even as we talk about economic manipulation that's been going on for decades, right? There's still great hope there to regenerate the system to something that was better. And I believe that has been built, and the public is believing that as well. And we know that because we're seeing the rise of cryptocurrencies, the rise of the blockchain today in such an intense, in an acute manner that we haven't seen before. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing right now with the rise of cryptocurrency, for example, and the blockchain is a byproduct of the beginning of the death of the old financial control system. You know, the 2009 financial crisis is what gave rise to this, this concept of a ledger that everyone basically is accountable to. It's completely non-manipulatable. It's not, no state is in control of it, and enables a truth machine of sorts. So, that's definitely true. And in fact, we can look at the internet as a whole, because all that really Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies represent is the financial application on the internet, really. So you can, trade, you can transfer value at the speed of light in a secure way to protect your identity, etc. But like, we're already seeing that explosion of information, and it started to cause a lot of problems in the conventional control structures. So that's what GreenMedInfo was, right? My initial attempt was to help to overcome what was already censorship at the primary layer.
Yes.
You couldn't speak to the research that already existed on the benefits of natural remedies for health and wellness. So I was like, okay, let's just take the research from the National Library of Medicine and let's put it in one spot and show over time, wow, there's really 3,000 studies on the benefits of turmeric. So it's not just some dude at a health food store, saying that this is good for you, right? It's like research. So there was already a lot of reasons why that made sense, but that was back in 2008, really, that I started that. Since then, now we're seeing what's happening right now, which is a complete attempt to lock down information, as well as, of course, the people in the world into their own homes. So there's such a we had this supernova event of freedom, and again, in the window of the 2009 financial crisis, of course, the basis for this new financial system was created, which is, again, a system that's technically still not owned by any nation or any specific corporation. You could make the argument, that most of the mining machines are owned by China, but that doesn't mean they can change the fundamentals of the blockchain itself. So there's something to what's happening now that's extremely encouraging and represents, this regeneration really of civilization, actually, is my belief. It's interesting because at the moment that the World Economic Forum and all these oligarch, billionaire, trillionaire class individuals try to take control of the world, a separate type of global governance structures emerging that is, again, trustless, permissionless, no third party involved, which is, again, true blockchain, based projects like, Bitcoin, Cardano, Cordal. I did the interview of the founders of Cordal, is another great example.
Well, we've communicated on Cordal. We've sent messages back and forth with no third party involvement.
Exactly.
Which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, the data is not capturable by the NSA or any other organization, and that's, I don't think, ever really happened before. So that means that there is a place for privacy, which is another word for sovereignty. Ultimately, I feel we are entitled to privacy, and if we don't have that, then there's no real self-possession. And so obviously, this discussion can be very broad. And, we can talk about all the other aspects of what's happening right now, things that are potentially regenerating.
Well, yeah, and I don't believe that the average, everybody is aware of the amount of censorship that occurs today and the amount of data collection that is happening. I mean, when you carry a phone with you or you have Google on your computer and you use Chrome, I mean, they're following you everywhere you go. They're looking through the lens of the video to watch what's happening in your house.
Mhm.
They're following you on your phone to see where you are in your house and where you go and what time you buy things and where you shop and that way they could use that data to manipulate you in a direction that they want you to move in, which
Yeah,
which is beyond crazy when you think about it. But that is exactly what is happening right now.
right. And I would add that that's because of the disclosure and consent forms we all signed when we use these services. So there are no victims here ultimately, is that data capture and then weaponization, which is, well known now. Anyone can look into Cambridge Analytica as an example of how they use the information to alter our emotions, our thoughts, behaviors. And ultimately it's because we've consented to use Facebook, Instagram, Google, Amazon. And that's where I think the rubber's really going to meet the road moving forward. I know I've been spending a lot of time with Kelly with working out how to raise chickens and how to have an organic farm. And I can't tell you how amazing it's been, Joel, just in the past month to just go pick our salad directly from the garden and then eat it. And it's like, wow, we just disintermediated something like 10,000 steps required to have Californian produce sent to our house with Instacart, with all the data in between. And that's, by the way, why the blockchain is a two-sided coin, because the blockchain is also being used to capture every single data point on the planet, which then is no longer, again, within your possession either. It will be used against you. So there's like two sides to every coin here. Literally, there's also a lot of scam cryptos. So I don't want people listening thinking, oh, blockchain crypto is just good. But I'm trying to make the point that we are ultimately responsible, as we are for our health, with everything that's going on outside of us. And that's a tough pill to swallow for some people. They're like, wait, this is totalitarianism. I mean, Joel, we had Vera Shiraz, who was a Holocaust survivor, who did an interview with Leah Wilson, co-founder of Stanfeld Freedom. And this is the woman that experienced the Nazis coming into her life and taking her friends and relatives and burning them in chambers. And she's saying what she's seeing happening now is extremely similar. So it's like, wow, like we're in that place now where there are, if you will, heaven and hell is an option. But it's always, I feel strongly it's our choices that are going to make that either a reality for us or, not.
Yeah, as it relates to healthcare, think of the amount of pressure that are on people right now to get the vaccine, to reopen the society that we once knew. And the only way that can be done is by getting this wonderful vaccine that saves everybody's lives. Yet, the amount of manipulation and that has gone into their research to proving how safe and effective the vaccine is insane. I mean, I read Pfizer's research paper. It's very difficult to get through that paper. It's very convoluted. They try and write in very complicated sentences that don't have proper structure. You know what I'm saying? To make it difficult to understand. But at the end of the day, what it shows is that they've hand selected out of their 30,000 people that they've studied, they've hand selected 170 of them. And out of those 170, they're now making a decision based on for over 7 billion people, because they say everybody should receive the vaccine. Yet if you look at the totality of the 30,000 individuals, you find that there's 9.5 times, like a 950% increase in symptoms if you get the vaccine. And so now it's rolling out and some people are getting it. A lot of people are choosing not to for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But now they're even blocking us from accessing data points that would share what is happening to the people who are getting it, because there are hundreds of thousands of injuries. There are thousands of deaths, yet only a very small percentage of those are being reported. Again, manipulating the communication, manipulating the information to guide you, just like sheep, exactly to where they want you to go to get this vaccine that ultimately genetically modifies human beings.
Yeah, for those listening, there's been very compelling research done on how many adverse vaccine events are captured by the post-marketing surveillance system that is employed presently. And keep in mind, the FDA, before releasing approval for these vaccines, released a 23-page PowerPoint which showed over 20 life-threatening side effects, one of which was literally death, associated with these vaccines. There will be monitoring as the post-surveillance marketing, that's what they call it. So that's 1% is captured, 1%, okay? So there's already been 500 deaths that have been acknowledged in the VAERS system. So that's 6,000 times what? That's times 100. So that's potentially 60,000 deaths, right? Is that
600,000?
Yeah, that's right. Well, God, it's even higher. That's insane. Do people understand what that means? Like, this is the cover up, like, and they can't even cover up those 6,000 bodies. And then their own acknowledgement is that's 1/100th of what is likely to be happening out there. And all the side effects from the vaccine match up with what they say COVID causes, even though COVID, of course, as we know, is influenza-like illness that has great PR, because they literally said influenza disappeared, which, by the way, can be broken down into something like 200 different forms of influenza ABC that can cause influenza-like illness. Because again, the complexity here of a single human being is like a galaxy. So this is absolutely propaganda of the most nefarious and egregious. And that's what we're up against, okay? So I can go all day and catastrophize.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. But I do think it's important that people really understand that we are in a health freedom crisis right now. And my point earlier is the same here, is unless we actually stand up and exercise those rights that are on that old piece of hemp paper, they won't be real. They have to be vivified with our action, our intention. And we created Stand for Health Freedom so that you could do it in one click of your mouse. And this is not a petition, because that's a whole psyop unto itself, is you just go click away all day on your mouse and think you've done anything, and they know they've captured your sentiment, your anger. That's what social media was all about, was everyone gets all upset or happy or shares this and that on social media, and they think they're doing something, and they're laughing behind their algorithm because they've captured your energy. But here's something you can do. After the CDC disaster panel from a few days ago, we've had—
Which was so powerful. If you haven't watched that, you got to go to standforhealthfreedom.com and watch the CDC panel. The call for the CDC what was the title of it?
Well, CDC, it was the data disaster. It's a call to investigate the CDC for their basically fraudulent data, that they broke several federal laws to push through changes in the way that they were able to, certify people dead from COVID without anything but suspicion of death. What does that mean? That's not evidence-based anything. And so, but my 30,000 emails have been sent since that event happened. There was 30,000 views. So every single person who watched it took an action. So unless we participate, it's a participatory universe, right? Nothing will change. We know the trajectory of where things are going. We can see evidence all around. This is now globally apparent, and we're actually still in one of the most relatively free of all countries. But there is no way this is just going to get better without us constantly making some effort to contribute to the truth getting out there and then taking positive action. So that's part of what we want to talk about here, is that, man, we have such a beautiful world that we can manifest together. I mean, we have so much information and so much technology on all levels, spiritual down to just, basic physical. But until we together, actually choose for that to be a reality, it's just not going to happen, you know? So I also want you all to be aware that we have about 35 more minutes. So those who do want to ask a question, we'll be moving into the Q&A period pretty soon. Feel free. We have someone working on just putting those questions into a document.
Yeah, so again, we're back to Dr. B.J. Palmer in 1951 wrote a book called Conflicts Clarify. And what he went on to say in the book is basically, in a time of conflict, in a time of difficulty, what it does is it clarifies what either needs to be done, or it clarifies your position, or it clarifies what needs to be changed. And so we're in conflict spiritually right now, economically right now, in relationships right now, in education, in healthcare, in communication, in government. There's a lot of conflict out there right now. But it seems to be clarifying the direction in which us as sovereign human beings would like to move. And it's not a surprise. It's not by accident that you wrote the book Regenerate, you know, as all of this was going down, because the basic fundamental and understanding of regeneration is that out of conflict, which can lead to death and disease and all these things, there is the possibility to regenerate if you take the right steps. I mean, you know, you can cut 40% of your liver out and your liver will regrow. You can smoke for decades and injure your lungs, but your lungs can regenerate, right? Every 120 days, we have brand new blood in our body. We have brand new blood cells. And so if those blood cells are made with the same level of thinking, with the same stresses, with the same toxicants, with the same, standard American diet type of living that were done 120 days ago, you will have the same result, and it will continue to degenerate and deteriorate. However, if you change the level of thinking and you change the environment and you create a healthier one that's with, righteousness, with joy, with peace, with happiness, with all of those things, right? Then your level of health will be, or your body's wisdom will be able to regenerate. You will produce the stem cells, the pluripotent stem cells that can differentiate into a muscle cell, into a heart cell, into a liver cell, into whatever it is that your body needs to be a better version of yourself, right? And that's the beauty that you laid out for us in regeneration. And I love the way that you use the ancestral wisdom that is true and has always been true, but with the mix of today's science, not the science of 50 years ago, like we're still using when it comes to viruses attacking us like a lion on the Serengeti, as you said in one of our interviews in the past. But today's science showing the power of regeneration and the power of our body's abilities to regenerate. I was at a park with my family last weekend, and I was watching this man who was probably in his late 60s, but he looked like he was older than that. And unfortunately, of course, it was typical. He could barely walk. His body was degenerated terribly. And you can tell just by looking at him that he was on multiple medications, obese, overweight. And I believe that his thought process is, this is just the way it is. It's just my luck. It's just the way it is. I'm old now. I'm just going to degenerate. And for the last 20 to 30 years, I'm basically going to crawl into my grave. That is not the truth. That is not what science shows. That is not the promise. We're promised 80 to 120 years of good health, but we have to create the environment. We have to unlock the regenerative mechanisms that our body has.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually documented evidence that there is a 256-year-old Chinese man. It's a very famous case in the sort of subject of longevity. It's totally feasible. Like, if you think of yogis that can slow their heartbeat down to where they appear to be dead, if your body is in a relatively pristine environment, I mean, there's ways you can absolutely preserve your stem cells and you could live a very long age. And again, there's some ways that you can reverse biological age. Best example, which I think I write about in the book, is the cessation of cigarette smoking. 9 months later, these Italian women, they evaluate all these criteria of aging, looking at skin markers. It's as if they had regained 13 years of youthfulness, you know? And you think about all the different exposures we have daily. And if we just mitigated some of those, our body will literally reverse biological aging. And so, you know, what you're saying is extremely helpful. And I mean, it's like gospel on some level, because we all need to be inspired and we all need to know that all of these chronic diseases that we're saddled with and the polypharmacy that so many people are basically, if you look at those who died from COVID, almost all of them were experiencing polypharmacy. They had a variety of comorbidities, and this is throughout the world. Remember the Italian study, the average age of the person who died from COVID, again, that's without them having to even do virus testing, was something like 78.6, and they had on average 2 to 3 chronic diseases, i.e. lethal diseases. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. So the message always is, you are responsible for your health and you are capable of profound healing as long as you are not constantly injuring yourself, as long as you're contributing to natural detoxification processes, you're moving intentionally, and most of all, and this is the piece that's taken me many years to get to, and Joel, you were way ahead of me from early on, is mindset. Mindset is everything. If you don't believe that you can heal fully and regenerate fully, it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not, you're not going to take the actions to make it happen, and you're not going to see it happen, and you'll have a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is what 100% of the medical establishment mindset is around, with the nocebo effect. They give you a diagnosis and they project, you know, the negativity on you, and you're like, well, I already outsourced my authority to you. I don't trust myself, so I guess you're right, doc. You know, it's just, this is the way we're captured. It used to be just medically, and now we're seeing they've literally turned allopathy and germ theory into a geopolitical weapon that has resulted in a totalitarian new world order governance structure. Like, this is literally pharma taking over the world, and it's because we have allowed them to do this over literally centuries. So this is the rebirth moment when we say, you know what, screw Descartes and screw all of these, you know, I'm sorry to be so like belligerent about it, but you know, there's something about anger sometimes that's actually therapeutic. When you start first, what does they say? Like first, around truth, like first you kind of get pissed off and then empowered, because you almost have to be angry at certain points of this psyop to really know you're awake. You know, when you see a little 2-year-old in a mask, right, coated with fluorocarbons or Teflon, like how can we live in a society where we don't get triggered by that, or don't want to see a better world where we're not abusing our children? You know, so I'm sorry, I don't think I can yet fully move beyond feeling the human feeling of anger or wanting to really just fight against the system. And I acknowledge that to the degree that I've contributed to co-creating this situation, it's not healthy for me to spend a lot of my energy in that direction. So I wonder what you think about that. You're not generally an angry or triggered person.
I'm not angry. I do get angry, but I like to channel that into action. Not long ago, just a couple of weeks ago, I believe. Yeah, I had a 2-year-old come in who, at the age of 1, was speaking, and then after her vaccines, regressed into on the spectrum of autism. And the mother knew it, and the medical doctor the pediatrician was saying, no, she needs to continue to get vaccines. And she did for 1 round, and then eventually came to the office, and we got her on, I think, a better path. But that gets me so frustrated and angry that people entrust a doctor who's trained by a pharmaceutical company to push their medications and drugs on children to control them from birth all the way to death and everywhere in between. In 1970, Merck's CEO Henry Gadsden said to his shareholders that we want, yes, our bottom line is growing and this is good, but he said we want Merck to be more like Wrigley's chewing gum, made for every man, woman, and child. And now 50 years later, they've accomplished that. There are drugs for when you're born, there are drugs for before you're born that they're giving the pregnant mother. And so I do feel like the population has been lied to and manipulated. And then here's the kicker for me. When Peter A. Abbey and Christine Stable-Ben, who are researchers who've been in Guinea-Bissau for 30 years, and they went back and looked at the data of 30 years of vaccination, okay, to children, and they believe in it wholeheartedly, some of the staunchest pro-vaccine people on the planet. They found that if they give the attenuated DTaP vaccine to children, that there is 500% more death to the children who get those vaccines. And so that research came out in 2017, 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
And so you stop and think, you're like, what? We're killing children at an alarming rate?
I remember publishing on it and getting a lot of backlash because
of course you're going to get backlash on it, because it's not the narrative that everybody wants to push.
Right.
And so what policy changes have occurred since then? What changes have pediatricians made in their practices to protect the children? Zero, because it's not about the children. And that's where people have to, like, at some point, you got to wake up and you got to realize that I am responsible. I'm 100% responsible for me. I can't give away my power to my doctor. I can't give away my power to the to CNN. I can't give away my power to the chiropractor or to Sayer G or to anybody else. I'm 100% responsible for me and my dependents. And when we get to that point, that's where we'll start making better decisions and having a massive shift extremely, extremely quickly as well.
Yeah, and to that point, for listeners, Stand for Health Freedom has been on the front lines advocating for you, making available tools so you can contact your elected officials and key decision makers when it comes to this issue of parental rights being literally stripped from all of us. This is part of the agenda, the greater good agenda, this concept of, like, you know, pharma conceived herd immunity, which is absolute garbage, is based on we will sacrifice certain children for the good of the whole. This concept is absolutely a violation of basic human, basic religious, basic constitutional rights. And right now in DC, they just passed a bill that will take the parent out of the equation. They're saying your children at 11 or younger could choose to be vaccinated without your consent. They're literally taking children away from families as we speak because of this way of thinking. And you need to stand up if you do not want this to happen. So I'm highly encouraging every single person who's watching this, make sure that you join the free Stand for Health Freedom newsletter. Take the actions. Please share it with at least 3 people. We need millions of people right now to be part of this movement. If there ever was a moment where we see the agenda, they're not even trying to hide it. They're not hiding it. They're actually going to try to bring it into your home. It's right now. This is vaccine
vaccine passports. They're now calling people like you and I who question vaccines. They're calling us criminals. I sent you the article this morning in the British Medical Journal where they're literally arguing, should we put these people behind bars because they're questioning the sanctity of the vaccination? This is absolutely absurd. And then asking for passports to be able to go to school and to travel and to get a job and all of these crazy things that seem so far out of the norm and so far away from American idealism, yet it's being accepted for some reason or being pushed through, and people aren't waking up fast enough to do anything about it. So please, stand for health freedom so you can actually do something about it to reclaim our sovereignty and our ownership basically over our own bodies, right? And our decision making over ourselves.
We're nonpartisan. That's the thing. And we have 250,000 people in the first year that have taken action, who are part of this growing movement. This represents a massive voting bloc as well for future elections where we actually might have a viable candidate. So I would hope that you would join us in this, because I really feel that there is nothing more important than banding together with people that share your values, that do not have a political agenda. This is about, we don't want to be penetrated against our will. We don't want our children taken from us. This is essential that we act now. Now, we don't have a lot of time left, so I want to switch to questions. We have 20 minutes. And here's some to get us into a less intense topic. This is around organic apples, and some have waxes on them. Yes, some have petroleum coating. Always do organic on anything if possible. I know there's some convenience and economic issues there, so do your best. If it's not organic, yes, definitely peel the surface, but keep in mind, lipophilic toxins penetrate through the surface of fruits and vegetables, and they accumulate not only in the plant tissue, but your tissue. So even though you might think you're washing the fruit or the vegetables or taking the peels off, it doesn't, there's always a risk there. Okay.
Can we also just mention, just think of the bigger picture of the purchasing power that you have. If you're supporting a local regenerative farm, right, that is organic, that is biodynamic, that is biodiverse, just think of the information you're getting from that food that's allowing you to resist and upgrade your genetic material to be amazing, to have better interaction with the environment and become healthier. Just think of those dollars, where they're going, and supporting that family that's running, and the workers that are running that regenerative farm that's doing good for the planet. Nobody wants to pour a Drano down a river or a stream, but farms, conventional farms, do way worse than that. You know, can you imagine taking Clorox bleach and going to your local river and just pour it in the water? You would feel horrible about yourself. You would never do that.
Well, a good example, Joel, is Gates. Like, people are so used to, you know, basically saying he's the devil now, like he's the guy that we have to take out. And the reality is that when you buy a non-organic piece of anything, you're supporting him, because he's just bought up most of the agricultural land in this country. And so there's so many ways that, obviously, voting through the conventional system that we can't even trust until a true blockchain-based solution emerges, which I already know several individuals that are creating and working on those right now. There's no way we can even trust that system. I mean, obviously. So voting with our dollars is, and even better, moving off the dollar, which is itself a toxic, weaponized instrument. That's the future, the deeper level. It's all integrated. We live in a holofractal universe. Every physical, spiritual thing connects to every other physical, spiritual thing. At least that's my belief.
Exactly, and that's why just buying a simple conventional apple contributes to the destruction of the world. And it sounds so like inflammatory, but at the basis, at its core essence, that's the truth.
Well, it's true too. It's like the butterfly effect. The same is true as well. You buy one locally farmed apple and you care for that farmer who cares for you, and you have the basis for healing the entire planet. It starts through relationship. It's not an abstract principle. And that is where we're moving. And that's one of the silver linings of this experience, right? Is that we've gone, all of us, down the toilet bowl of the last year. We've come out, we're here alive and doing quite well, even though I had my, come to Jesus moments a few times there. I'm sure we all have. And that's the point. We are resilient, regenerative beings. And if we continue to put in the work, we will get stronger. And this field, we're growing. Even this live stream, I mean, we have 400 people on. That's amazing. We are together growing the new world that we want to inhabit. Here's another question. What prevents the digital blockchain from being hacked and digitally manipulated by these present-day financial controllers? That's a great question. I will say that the number one issue with big money coming into blockchain-based products is that their intentions are not to heal the world and give us all economic liberation and allow us to have all our data ourselves. It's quite the opposite. That said, they see it as a life raft because their fiat dollar system is literally imploding. 25% of all dollars in existence were printed last year. That means that
Crazy.
25% of the spending power of every dollar in existence went down last year. And just in this last, 3 months, 12% more money was created. So it's another 12% inflation. Literally, the dollar is dying. Okay.
Yeah.
So what that means is that even the big, like BlackRock, which has $7-8 trillion under management, that's more than 3 big countries, including the UK, put together. They're now getting into Bitcoin. It's not for the right reasons necessarily, but they don't have a choice because they see that state-backed financial fiat instruments are extremely toxic. They're imploding everywhere. They're just printing insane amounts, basically diluting everyone's value and or taking money, or it's basically like being a thief. Like you're just taking people's value from them without anyone having oversight. So when you hear blockchain being applied to like a Rockefeller back project to get your ID to be on the blockchain, yeah, obviously they have bad intentions. But the real blockchain that we're talking about, like with Cordal and even Bitcoin, is not controlled by any specific actor or state or corporation. It's in the collective. It's run by multiple nodes across a distributed network that anyone can participate in. And that is why it's so revolutionary. So we've done other talks about this. We'll do more in the future, but it's a good question to ask. It's not all good, but there's so much good about it. Okay, so what do you think about the long-term effects for those people receiving the vaccine? Do you want to go ahead, Joel, on this one?
Well, I'm just going to say we don't know. Because the people who are receiving the vaccine right now are the guinea pigs, period. They received emergency use authorization after phase 3 clinical trial, where the data was not as positive as they made it sound, 95% effective. And now we're literally in phase 4 clinical trial. So for the next 2 years, they're going to be monitoring what happens to the population. But people don't know that. They're not saying, I'm signing up, let me sign up to be a guinea pig, right? And so when asked, because one of the researchers who was the senior vice president of Pfizer, of infectious disease and allergy, said, I'm very concerned because the protein that this vaccine forces your cell to make, which releases into your body and then your immune system attacks it, is very similar to the protein, and it looks homologous to the protein that creates the placenta. And so the question was asked, does this lead to fertility issues? Because I can see that it leads to fertility issues, says the former vice president of Pfizer.
It would be abortive.
Pardon me?
It would be abortive, technically. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It would cause an abortion or cause no conception or something like that. And the answer was, we'll know in 2 years. We'll let you know.
That's a great example.
It's fascinating.
I think for people to understand this, one fact is really important when it comes to vaccination in general. Consider that the logic being applied here is that you are proposing that by injecting someone with this intervention, that you can prove it's effective by a non-event. Okay, meaning like if it's a measles vaccine, you're saying you can prove it effective because that person didn't get measles. The absurdity of this is rendered, obvious when you think about the infinite number of variables that contribute to anything happening to anybody, both in terms of wellness and disease. In other words, it's absolutely logically absurd to propose that your criteria for proving something effective is that it isn't going to cause an event to happen. And that it's not measurable, in other words. You can't prove it. It's just absurd. And all these epidemiological studies, everyone knows there are an infinite number of variables you can control for that they don't control for. It's highly manipulated. This is not science. So when you go down to just the very rudimentary philosophical question around vaccine efficacy, it's absolutely absurd that someone would propose that vaccines have been proven effective looking at that absurdity. I mean,
on that note, I'd just like to say this. 54% of children by the age of 5 have chronic disease that they will most likely live with for the rest of their lives. we've witnessed now the single greatest degradation of human health in recorded history, where the U.S. is now the worst place for a child who is born to survive its first day in all developed nations. The U.S., compared to all developed nations on the planet, is the worst place, ranks last for survivability in the first year of life. So infant mortality here in the U.S. is higher than everywhere else, yet we vaccinate the most. And in countries like in Europe, where they vaccinate half, their mortality rates are approximately half of what they are in the US. And so my question is, why would we trust the CDC, Dr. Fauci, the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Health, when they have overseen the greatest decline in human health in recorded history? And we're going to turn to them and say, please tell us what to do because we're in this so-called pandemic right now. I find that it's insanity and almost comical, but very sad at the same time.
Yeah, it's very helpful for people to understand even the history behind the attempts to deplatform GreenMedInfo, which was back in 2018. They just kicked us off MailChimp. We looked it up, and MailChimp is a CDC Foundation partner, which is the non-profit extension of CDC, which enables private corporations and individuals to influence, even anonymous donors, to influence CDC policy and practice and their programming. And this is the way they get around the fact that they can't just shut down the First Amendment of a platform like ours, but they can try to shut down, indirectly by taking, it's actually Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, where big tech corporations can, pretty much shut down anyone, even though they're acting as publishers, they're immune against it. So everything is all connected to how the CDC has become literally a fascist entity, right? They're just a merger of corporate and government interests, and it's not about the public health any longer. We've all seen that.
And military.
And how can, and the military, and exactly, good point. How can they have actual vaccine patents and not have conflicts of interest down to the core? But yeah, thank you. It's the militarization is the next more concerning thing we're dealing with. The Pentagon is distributing these vaccines right now. That is that's a violation of posse comitatus, right? Which you're not supposed to have the military involved in enforcement of civil affairs. There's so many things about what's happening right now that violate every aspect of the Constitution. But again, under the auspices of a public health emergency, they are able to suspend the Constitution. And so that's where we're, again, even the event with the CDC, data disaster, we're showing where is the emergency? The data itself does not show there is a public health emergency. And you even tried to tinker with that illegally to make it look worse than it was. But there is still no evidence to show that there is a public health emergency beyond, of course, the mainstream media projecting absolute hysteria onto the world through their case-demic and all the other things they've done. Okay, so it's clear that you are recommending food as opposed to supplementation. I'm curious to know if you would share with us any supplements you may take on a daily basis. Now, interestingly, I just stopped taking supplements because on some level, I was getting into the allopathic mindset of, oh, there's something off with me, so I need to fix it with these pills. It's not to say supplements aren't infinitely safer and more effective than FDA-approved drugs, which half of them are stripped from the market before their patent life expires due to the deadly side effects that they have, okay? But for me, I like to use food because ultimately food is medicine, and that is the key of regenerating. So yes, you can use supplements. I personally think you should focus on the food first and fix the underlying psychospiritual, emotional stuff and lack of discipline when it comes to intentional movement, which is incredibly medicinal. How about you, Joel? What do you think about that question?
I mean, we've talked about this many times. We prefer whole food. If you're going to supplement, we prefer whole food supplements. I mean, so many people, for example, take calcium and they go to the grocery store, get calcium, and they think it's good for their bones, yet it leads to osteoporosis, it leads to plaquing of the arteries, because the calcium they're getting is from rock. They're literally shaving rock, putting it in a pill, and that's what you're taking and thinking you're doing something good for yourself. But the calcium in green leafy vegetables, that your body it knows exactly what to do with that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
And so ideally we're getting it from whole, healthy foods. Absolutely.
Wonderful. As far as the question around the mono diet, the apple mono diet, Joelle's actually the only person I know who's done, I think, a 7-day apple mono diet. Like, first I want to qualify this. I'm not suggesting anyone do this for prolonged periods of time. My main advocacy is if you skip a meal, eat an apple instead, and you find that your body actually wants to rest and your life totally simplifies overnight, you may find that your body is finally able to relax into regenerating and, really cleaning house, and you're not really hungry, because when you're hungry, you'll eat another apple. You'll find if you're not wanting to grab for that apple, you're not really hungry. But some people do go for prolonged mono diet. It's sort of like a fast, but you don't really have to fast. So it could be 2-3 days. I don't actually like for people to do it to those extremes in northern latitudes. I think summertime, spring is best. So keep that in mind. This is just a way of really getting familiar with your own body, trusting it, simplifying your life, and resetting. Because many of us have extra meals that are just fermenting in our gut, that we're constantly stuffing new food in. That's not the way to live. This is a good way to reset things.
Well, and also it's powerful for regeneration. I mean, when you're fasting, even if you're doing a water fast, I mean, your body is using up your stored energy that you on purpose store in 4 times of fast. And so it creates a regenerative mechanism. It unleashes the regenerative mechanism. It produces a bunch of stem cells. I mean, the level of focus, energy that you have after doing a few days of that is absolutely phenomenal. I think everybody should try it, even if it's only for a couple of days, like you mentioned. I don't want to say even only a couple of days, because that sounds like I'm minimizing it. I'm not. But the mono diet for 2 days, for 1 day, for 2 days, for 3 days, fantastic. And just watch what happens to your taste buds, because those apples taste so delicious. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how your taste buds change so quickly.
It's so true. And consider that some of the ancient advocates of fasting observed that those who fasted, their body would digest the least healthy tissue first, leaving intact the healthy tissue. And this is all the way in the case of tumors. So that is you relying on your body's ability to clean house, trusting that it will know what to do, because there's divine intelligence that is suffused throughout your tissue. And that's never going to happen when you take the route of thinking that you need a body mechanic or some other external source in order to find balance again. So that's, why I think it's worth exploring the Apple approach. So we have to close, but I'll just maybe pass it to you, Joelle, for final words, and then say a word myself. And thank you again, everyone who has participated in this masterclass as well as our live streams. But I'll let you go ahead.
Ultimately, what I just want to share with people is if you're, I want to say, struggling with the situation that's happening right now, you have the full power and decision-making ability to change it. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're struggling spiritually, then go to church, do yoga, meditate, do whatever it takes that will help you succeed spiritually. If you're struggling economically, use the blockchain to free yourself from the shackles of the economic burdens that have been placed upon us. Family and relationships, start being with them again. Start resisting the lockdowns that are separating us, that are dehumanizing us. It's so anti-human what's happening right now. And so the only way we break this is by not following what they're telling us to do. Stop listening to the NIH. Stop listening to the CDC. Stop listening to the Department of Health, who've literally caused the greatest destruction of human health in recorded history. And so get together with your family. Go visit your grandma. Go have dinners with your friends and family, right? Communication, turn off the television. Stop using Google. Start using other platforms. I don't know if you're following GreenMedInfo on Telegram, but start following and using other platforms that are not tracking you, that are not following you, that are not manipulating you based on the data that they're sourcing, right? In healthcare, I always say it's time for a divorce with medicine. Unless it's an emergency or a crisis situation, it's time to say sorry. You know, we've been together for too long. It's not working out anymore, right? And start using your natural healthcare practitioners, your chiropractors, your acupuncturists. Start using the people who are clued in to what causes your body to heal and regenerate and recreate itself in a great, healthful way. As for education, for education, start learning. I believe you're here. You're already on the bandwagon. You're already educating yourself at a different level than what's out there now. You know what they're telling us now is that we need to change the word breastfeeding to chest feeding. That we have to blur the lines between boys and girls because it doesn't. It's too exclusionary. These are all lies that are being propagated by a way of thinking that most of humanity does not agree with, yet they want to impose it on our lives. Yeah. So literally, it's time to say no to this. It's time to say, I'm not into the Great Reset. It's time to get out. It's time to go to businesses without masks. It's time to use your purchasing power in the way that you know is going to contribute to a healthful world, right? To like restore hope and healing and wellness and well-being to humanity, where certain peoples and organizations are trying to remove it. And so you have the power, you have the sovereignty, reclaim it. Yeah. You must reclaim it. Sayer cannot reclaim my sovereignty. Cannot happen. I have to do it for myself. I do it for my children, and I have to do it for myself. So do that. And if everybody on this live stream does it, and then we share it with the people around us, all of a sudden there's a swell, a groundswell, and there's cells of freedom that are re-engaging and reopening communities around the country, around the world. And all of a sudden we break down this mess that we're in right now. And so it's no longer acceptable, I believe, to walk into a store with a mask, even if the government says it's not allowed. Mm-hmm. It's no longer acceptable anymore to not go visit grandma because you've been told you're going to kill her. That's insanity. Yeah, it needs to stop, and it needs to stop. And so the beauty is, as soon as we change our mind like that, regeneration happens, healing happens, alignment between mind, body, and spirit begins to occur, and you start to feel better, and you start to talk better, and you start to see hope and light instead of darkness and despair, like so many of us are experiencing right now. And so make those decisions, because it will absolutely transform your life.
Beautiful. I can't say it better myself. So last thing I'll say is that, the most powerful form of protest today is just simply being healthy and doing what you know is right, as Joelle has pointed out. It takes a lot of courage, and yet when you do it and your loved ones that you do it, you've just changed the world. That is the most important thing. It's not that difficult to go out in the world, free breathing, just be a human again, and you're a revolutionary. That's truly what's going to change the world. So thank you everyone who's been on this live stream. We will see you again, and you'll be in our minds and hearts out there. We're in this together, and together we are going to make a huge difference. All right, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.